The Galactic Council convened in grim silence. The chamber, typically buzzing with translated chatter and rhythmic diplomatic ceremony, now pulsed with a tension so raw it crackled between delegates. Over 2,000 species occupied the Union. All but one had agreed, in one form or another, to the centuries-old concord of civilized sentience. All but one had submitted, grudgingly or willingly, to the old unspoken rule, the strong must bow, eventually, to the collective. And yet humanity, a species barely known 100 years ago, had refused. Not passively. Not with ignorance. With clarity. Repeatedly. Explicitly. This meeting, hastily summoned in the shadow of Earth's third rejection of open negotiation, felt less like a diplomatic exercise and more like a crisis council in the face of an extinction class event. Panic was a word not often used at this level of government. But it described the atmosphere precisely. A slender being from the Korathi Reach, covered in fronds that glowed with stress-reactive bioluminescence, raised a trembling limb. They've not only refused integration, they've rejected even dialogue. That is not caution. That is defiance. Silence. Then came the low reverberating chime of approval from the Arxeld representative. Arxelds, ancient, water-bound telepaths, rarely spoke aloud. The sound of their agreement added weight the room did not know how to bear. Data streamed across the table from a Vren archivist, population growth curves, industrial expansion, off-world colonization rates, theoretical armament capabilities. None of it made sense by conventional models. Humans should not have had faster-than-light travel by this point. They should not have reached a sustainable colonization phase. They should not, under any natural evolution of development, be operating in 3 different star systems without any external aid. Yet they were. And they'd done it without sharing a single byte of data with the Galactic Concord. The Jari delegate, whose species had once enslaved 10 systems before being peacefully integrated, hissed a warning. They act in unity. Not like a hive. Like a decision. Calculated. Unyielding. The Dkara, a species that operated via collective neural consensus, attempted to apply models of predictive behavior. None fit. Human strategic patterns, especially after first contact was officially acknowledged and dismissed, diverged dramatically from projections. They had built nothing that suggested offense. No fleets had entered foreign systems. No weapons had been tested in hostile zones. And yet the Council was afraid. Because the silence meant something. Because the refusal to participate was not born of weakness, but of intention. A proposal was raised, a diplomatic envoy, escorted by a neutral fleet, to deliver peaceful intention and request renewed communication. It barely passed. The margin was so narrow, so reluctant, that even the result failed to produce relief. The vote felt like appeasement, to each other more than to humanity. In the private alcoves where real decisions were whispered, lesser member species panicked. The Scolari opened refugee channels for colonies near the Orion Arm. The Hovax initiated emergency asset withdrawal from trade ports near human expansion zones. No alarms sounded, no threats had been made. But the stars shifted with fear nonetheless. For the elder species, those who remembered the time before unity, the signs were unmistakable. The humans were not isolated. They were choosing isolation. There had been species like them once. Briefly. Until they were guided, or wiped away. But Earth had not waited to be discovered. Earth had discovered them. Initial first contact had not come through official channels. A minor scouting drone from the Veltrain Dominion had vanished in a system no one cared about. Years later, the Dominion received a return signal, a tight beam packet containing their own encrypted language and a simple message, *, we appreciate your gift. It was instructional, *. Since then, humanity had operated with awareness of the galactic community but chose not to join it. Every approach had been met with passive surveillance, sometimes eerie mimicry. Once, a council diplomat swore a human ship replicated the exact formation of their own escort fleet for 43 hours without breaking formation. It peeled away without a word. No aggression. No plea. No diplomacy. Just awareness. Now, the Council's high chamber echoed with unspoken fear. Not that the humans would attack, but that if they ever did, the galaxy might not be ready. They were not unpredictable. They were unreadable. And in a universe governed by algorithmic trust and interspecies behavioral protocols, that made them the most dangerous civilization alive. The diplomatic fleet arrived in Seoul under the strictest codes of peaceful approach. Its lead vessel transmitted ceremonial greetings, translated into multiple Earth languages and symbolic gesture chains. These had never failed. Even war-born species eventually responded. But Earth returned only silence. Orbital scans found no planetary defenses in conventional form. No orbital weapon platforms. No signs of active military installations. But the fleet registered energy readings inconsistent with known technology. Localized space-time distortion, momentary mass shifts. Instruments could not identify the source. It was like Seoul had been folded inward in places, then flattened back out. 17 hours after entry, a human vessel appeared. It did not decloak. It did not arrive via a recognized corridor. It was simply there. One moment empty space, the next a ship over 100 kilometers long, shaped like a monolith of polished void. No insignia. No propulsion signature. Just presence. Without a word, it moved to flank the Council delegation. Not in an aggressive posture, but like a predator observing from close range. Communications officers across 3 species initiated hailing attempts using every frequency, protocol, and symbolic vector known. No reply. Then came the transmission. Audio only. One voice. Genderless. Accentless. Machine clear. This is Earth's sovereign authority. Leave our system. No contact requested. No terms accepted. No dialogue entertained. No emotion. No threats. Just a statement. Final. The Council fleet paused. Standard procedure dictated they follow up. Offer terms. Offer gifts. Show good faith. The Veltrain envoys spoke calmly in their soft-toned lilt, offering data exchange treaties, unrestricted technology samples, cultural archives. Earth did not respond. 12 minutes passed. The human ship emitted a brief gravitational distortion, a localized compression of spacetime that dragged the lead Council ship 6 kilometers off course without touching it. The gravitational wave stopped as quickly as it began. No weapons. No visible mechanism. Just a demonstration. Council forces backed away. Not in retreat. In uncertainty. 200 years of protocol had never accounted for silence as escalation. Internal discussions spread rapidly. Perhaps Earth was damaged. Perhaps mistrust ran too deep. Others argued the humans were testing boundaries, learning how far they could push before consequence. But deeper analysis told a different story. Archived transmissions showed Earth had already intercepted multiple diplomatic packages over the last 3 decades. They hadn't misunderstood. They hadn't rejected terms because of ignorance. They had studied everything. Read the laws. Learned the languages. Dissected the meanings. And they still said no? One analyst recovered a forgotten artifact, the first message ever recovered from Earth's response to alien contact, hidden deep within a private channel sent to a minor academic coalition. It read simply, "You built your peace on compliance. We learned from history not to comply." What terrified the Council wasn't what humanity said, it was what they didn't need to. They didn't posture. They didn't bluff. They didn't display ships in formation or chant war songs like the old species used to. They didn't claim superiority. They simply refused to play the game. They had mastered their corner of space quietly, quickly, and without cultural leakage. Despite 1,000 surveillance drones, not one recorded any recognizable diplomatic ritual, interspecies symbolism, or hierarchy of contact. The dreadnought never moved again. It held its position near the Council fleet for 6 hours, completely stationary. Then it disappeared. Not jumped. Not warped. Disappeared. Scans confirmed no engine flare, no dimensional ripple. One moment there, the next not. The only trace left behind was a tiny object, non-metallic, non-radioactive, floating in space. It was a single sphere, polished and smooth, made of fused silica. Engraved in microscopic text across its surface were 6 words, readable only by extreme magnification. We said what we meant. Leave. That night, multiple council factions held emergency sessions. Military models were updated. Predictive AI systems began new simulations, but none could produce reliable outcomes. No species in the recorded history of the Galactic Union had responded like this. No emotion. No threats. No war. Just absolute clarity, backed by capabilities no one had witnessed before. Earth had declined communication 3 times. That met the threshold under Council law for non-cooperative classification. But no one moved to enforce it. The Galactic Council could not understand why humanity had chosen silence. Every projection, every behavioral index used across thousands of civilizations failed to produce a motive. Their databases modeled species by evolutionary origin, environmental pressures, neurological structure. But humans fit no mold. So a covert academic commission was authorized to investigate Earth's historical archives. Not their broadcasts or official transmissions, those were too curated. They wanted raw data. What they found was not comforting. Humanity had not emerged from unity, but from collapse after collapse. Their civilizations were built on the bones of previous failures. Empires that fell, ideologies that burned themselves out, borders redrawn by blood and fire. Earth's history was an unbroken chain of disasters, each followed by recovery at a faster, more vicious pace. They discovered that Earth had not achieved peace through enlightenment. It achieved it by exhaustion. After 2 planetary wars, several genocides, and the near-total collapse of global climate systems, the surviving powers forged what they called the Cold Unity Treaty. It was not peace, it was a ceasefire extended into a system. No leaders held lifetime power. No planetary government remained above a strict constitutional limit. Every citizen was trained in survival, engineering, and ethics from adolescence. Conflict was not removed. It was embedded, regulated, and sublimated into progress. They abandoned the concept of central ideology. Instead of one belief, they held many, competing constantly under structured debate. Instead of suppressing disagreement, they weaponized it for innovation. Divergence was treated as fuel. When the first alien signal was detected, humanity did not celebrate. They did not panic. They archived it, studied it, and ran scenarios. No announcements were made. No responses sent. For 30 years, Earth said nothing. In that time, they quietly advanced spaceflight, tripled their computational power, and expanded industrial operations to their moon and asteroid belts. Humanity understood the risk. They had lived through centuries of contact where superior forces enforced systems under the name of order. To them, the Galactic Council was not a diplomatic assembly. It was a pattern they had seen before. Consolidation, control, compliance. Different vocabulary, same function. Their response was not a result of ignorance. It was strategy. They adapted every useful detail from intercepted transmissions, encoded languages, energy signatures. Not to join, but to prepare. They didn't seek to become another voice in the chorus. They built their own music. An internal briefing by the Research Commission described the Earth Doctrine as non-alignment by design. It wasn't that they were hostile. It was that they saw participation as surrender of narrative. They would not speak in terms not chosen by themselves. Further studies revealed how humans responded to existential threats. Not with fear, but with system overhauls. Pandemics led to global genomic infrastructure. Food crises ended with vertical farms layered in space stations. No issue sparked collapse that wasn't answered with a new paradigm. Their species-wide memory was soaked in betrayal, from their own governments, from alliances that crumbled, from ideologies that led to ruin. So when offered a place in a galactic collective, they saw not an invitation but a trap. They remembered what happened when empires offered peace after conquest. and they remembered the price of submission. Even their education systems reflected this. Children learned ancient philosophy beside modern physics, studied both democracy and dictatorship, not to believe but to recognize patterns. The result wasn't harmony. It was resilience. A kind that could not be easily mapped or modeled. In a rare intercepted speech from a Martian outpost, a human official summarized their stance. We learned the cost of being invited. Now we choose to remain uninvited. There were no centralized rulers, but their communication systems were flawless. There was no universal religion, but a shared value, autonomy over assimilation. They were not unpredictable because they were chaotic. They were unpredictable because their logic did not seek stability, it sought sovereignty. The final report submitted to the Council made no recommendation. It ended with a single warning, translated directly from a human strategic doctrine. Diplomacy begins when both sides have the option to walk away. We've already walked. Several Council species began contingency planning the moment Earth declined contact for the third time. Not a war footing, none were prepared for open conflict, but preemptive isolation protocols. Trade corridors were rerouted. Long-range patrols were assigned alternate paths. Informal embargoes began quietly, without vote or official notice. The reasoning was clear: if humanity would not integrate, they would be contained. But Earth had already prepared for that move. Before the first envoy had ever arrived, they created a parallel network, non-reliant on Council infrastructure, free of shared quantum relays or interstellar treaties. Independent wormhole arrays blinked into place along human-claimed systems, each one positioned with surgical precision. Energy sources were self-contained. Supply chains ran entirely within human-dominated zones. They didn't need the galaxy. And now the galaxy realized too late that Earth had never planned to. A new pattern emerged. Human probes began appearing in unclaimed systems along the rim. Not invasive, not territorial. They simply scanned, deployed automated microfactories, and left. No markers, no claims, no declarations of settlement. Yet weeks later those systems were occupied. Terraforming underway. Colonies silent and invisible to foreign sensors unless they wanted to be seen. The scale defied logic. No species had ever expanded this quickly without overextension. But Earth didn't expand like an empire. It grew like a system. Each new colony fed the next. Each outpost was a module. No capital. No central hub to strike. Only distributed autonomy. Attempts to observe were met with quiet interference. Council drones failed to transmit data or returned corrupted. Those sent physically either vanished or returned months later, unable to explain what had happened, often with months of memory missing. Council analysts began compiling psychological models of human behavior based not on communication, but on deployment patterns. The findings were disconcerting. Humans did not prioritize resources or proximity to power lanes. They prioritized strategic redundancy. Every colony was backed by at least two others within emergency response range. They were building an immune system, not an empire. One report described it succinctly. They are not preparing to expand. They are preparing to survive collapse. Militaries were quietly consulted. Scenarios drafted. Even the most aggressive projections showed no path to successful containment. Not without sacrificing entire sectors. Not without initiating first strike offenses, which violated Council law and would trigger schism among the Union. Meanwhile, smaller species watched and shifted allegiances. Several border systems began mimicking Earth's decentralization strategies. Unofficial trade began flowing toward human-adjacent zones, untraceable through Council tariffs. The economic grip of the central systems began to weaken, not from rebellion, but from quiet adaptation. Earth said nothing during all of it. Not a single response. No messages, no demands, no gestures of aggression. Just continuous growth. The most troubling revelation came when the Kara consensus uncovered deep band pulses beneath standard comms channels, gravitational signal threads. Buried in them were encoded patterns, traced back to human colonies. The purpose was unclear until they discovered that those pulses synchronized movement across hundreds of vessels. Humans were coordinating without sound, light, or data. They were using spacetime itself as a medium. No interception possible. No disruption feasible. And yet they hadn't attacked anyone. The fear didn't stem from violence. It came from the implication: humans were not preparing for war. They were preparing to outlive everyone else. By the time the Council reconvened to formally vote on containment protocols, it was irrelevant. Humanity's presence had already spread past known perimeters. A new colony was detected in a dead system once thought uninhabitable. Council ships investigating found a sealed station. No doors. No transmissions. Just a wall-mounted plaque in the human standard script. Observation is not permission. Survival is not aggression. We don't need your approval. The plaque wasn't metal. It was diamond. Forged in pressure no Council species could replicate without fusion instability. A symbol not of wealth, but of precision. And still, no human voice had been heard. Every move Earth made followed one principle: deny nothing, explain nothing, require nothing. The galaxy had prepared for war, rebellion, diplomacy, even insurgency. It had never prepared for independence. 3 standard cycles passed without further incident. No contact. No expansion beyond the rim. Human colonies stabilized. Resource consumption plateaued. Trade vectors remained dormant. From a distance, it appeared as though Earth had reached its terminal growth. Analysts began to recalibrate. The panic softened into strategic tolerance. The Council told itself that humanity's refusal to integrate was cultural, not existential. That they would reach a limit. That their silence was the ceiling. Then came the anomaly in the Talos Fold. An uncharted gravitational event disrupted long-range scanners, followed by the sudden disappearance of 3 Council research vessels. Automated recon drones sent to investigate ceased transmission upon entering the system. When physical teams arrived weeks later, they found nothing but empty space, and data echoes of engineered curvature. The only recovered evidence was a signal, low frequency, locked to one phrase repeated endlessly in multiple languages. Do not measure what you cannot comprehend. There was no aggression. No wreckage. Just absence and warning. The data was cross-referenced. The signature matched faintly with human gravitational patterns observed near Sol, but refined beyond known capability. Not just manipulation of mass, sculpting of space-time. It wasn't power that alarmed the Council. It was restraint. Earth could have demonstrated supremacy. Instead, it offered impossibility. Each action calibrated for minimum confrontation and maximum implication. Not intimidation, but inevitability. Smaller species quietly withdrew from Council programs. Others began opening indirect exchanges with human colonies, not through formal embassies, but via encoded trade offers embedded in nonverbal frequency clusters. Earth responded in kind. No declarations. Just goods. Technology. Genetic tools. Anti-entropy devices. Compact power cells. All without labels, origin tags, or regulation. By the time the Council tried to intervene, it was too late. Parallel markets had formed beyond centralized control. Entire sectors began running dual economies, one for public record, one for silent exchange with the human network. A silent consensus spread: Earth didn't want control, it wanted detachment. The final shift came when a Council envoy was invited, without request, to a human facility, an outpost built inside the accretion disk of a red dwarf star. No species had ever constructed at that depth. The visitor was allowed to observe, to walk corridors lined with living alloy, to see autonomous systems coordinating without centralized input. When asked why the invitation was extended after so long, the human representative replied, "We have nothing to hide. Only everything to protect." No negotiation followed. No offer of alliance. The envoy was returned with the same quiet efficiency. The report submitted afterward was classified across all tiers. Not for what it revealed, but because of what it failed to explain. The systems they saw could not be replicated. The materials were not in Council databases. The architectural logic of the station bore no known pattern. One analyst described it as designed for a species with no fear of collapse. No consensus could be reached on how to respond. Sanctions had failed. Isolation had failed. Engagement had failed. Humanity had not escalated, yet the galaxy now bent around its gravitational center, politically, technologically, and ideologically. The Council could not challenge Earth without sacrificing its own coherence. Any act of force would split the Union. Any appeal to law would be ignored. Humanity recognized no authority but consequence. Eventually, a final communiqué was drafted, not to negotiate, but to acknowledge. It was sent not as a formal message, but embedded as code within an ancient Earth format, an archived type and used for centuries. The humans replied in kind, through a text-based sequence rendered in machine-readable poetry. No names, no promises, no binding clauses. Just a closing phrase. We were never lost. Just unwilling to be found. There was no return address. No follow-up. The galaxy moved on. Trade resumed. Treaties were signed. Wars broke out and ended elsewhere. Yet every chart was quietly updated to mark the Sol systems as neutral by necessity, not by agreement. Ships deterred. Probes avoided scan range. Not from fear, but from understanding. The humans had not threatened extinction. They had made themselves irrelevant to conquest.